Welcome. I'm J. Michael Silver, and this is Foundational Steps, the show where I talk with people about the choices they've made in the past to get where they are in life. In this episode, I'm talking with David H. Lawrence XVII. David is an amazing man with quite the amazing story. After 36 years as a voice on radio, he gave it all up to move to Los Angeles for a career in TV and film. You might have seen him on big shows like Lost and even bigger movies like Iron Man. In addition to being a great actor, he's also an entrepreneur and a teacher, helping actors create their own career doing voiceover. Links to David are in the show notes. Please support the show by leaving a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And check out our affiliate links in the show notes. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome, David. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is awesome. You know, it's funny because as I was mentioned before we started recording, like you've done like every popular TV show out there, and I feel like a lot of people, if they're watching this versus listening to it, they might recognize you from one of their favorite shows.
Every episode of every show? That seems a little overstating it.
Okay, that's overstating it.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I am thrilled with what I've been able to accomplish and what generosity this industry has shown me, and I've done some really interesting work, and I'm really happy, and I thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate you being here. It's awesome. In our emails, in setting this up, you had mentioned that you kind of got your start, or you did get your start in voiceover and radio. So
radio, yeah.
Was this from a childhood thing, or were you a child when you got started in radio? What was?
I guess, I mean, if you count being 16 years old as a child, I mean, it actually, as I've examined, sort of the evolution of this, I really had the first inklings that I wanted to be a performer when I was 7 or 8. I watched a film called Gijo.
Gijo,
yeah. It starred Jackie Gleason.
Oh, okay.
And Jackie Gleason, I believe, is one of the most underrated actors in the history of our business.
Yeah, he's amazing.
This film, he was a deaf mute. So talk about easy memorizing your lines.
Yeah.
There were none.
Gijo, I'm gonna have to look that up
Gijo,
afterwards.
Gigot. It's a drama about a deaf mute building janitor who gets accused of sexually abusing one of the residents' children, and I couldn't understand why I was laughing and crying and just like connected.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even put it into words, but I knew that there was something special about doing this kind of work. And so then I fell in love with radio. And
now, I mean, you're not that old, so how did you? I mean, you're watching movies and TV. Everyone else is like falling in love with with TV and movies. How did you fall in love with radio? Because I feel like radio, once the TV came along, before your time, I'm guessing long before your time, the radio was not like what I hear my father used to talk about, the Shadow and the different radio programs. So.
Sure. Radio for me was music. It was DJs. It was sports.
Okay.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, so I used to listen to the Cavaliers. I used to listen to them sink baskets for the wrong team by taking the ball in the wrong direction after the halftime tip-off, when they used to have halftime tip-offs. Radio to me was listening to stations in far-off locations. Like in Cleveland, that would be Windsor, CKLW, the Big 8, or 77 WABC in New York, or Chicago, WGN or WCFL. And then there was this FM radio, which was kind of like, it sounded better, but it was kind of weird. In Cleveland, we had WMMS, which was the rocker station, and many of these stations, 1220 WGAR and WKYC and all these stations in Cleveland, I ended up working at. And
that's cool.
Growing up and hearing trying to figure out how they did it.
Mhm.
You know, for me, it's always been, how do they do that? Like I had this stupid image in my head that records had like a white band on the outside, and that the DJs would watch the needle, and as it got closer and closer to the black, they would stop talking right before the singer started singing. I didn't have any idea about count up clocks or intro times or anything, right? I was just like fascinated by it.
That's cool.
And so a DJ at the station in Cleveland that I really loved listening to, I wrote him, and instead of throwing the letter away, he wrote me back, and he kind of mentored me, and I ended up working at their sister station in Columbus, Ohio, when I went to Ohio State, and it just took off from there.
That's amazing.
And it introduced me to the world of artifice that's okay.
Yeah.
Not like artifice that's misinformation or, conspiracy theories, but artifice that builds the story. And you and I engage in that all the time. Television is 99% artifice. What you see that's created by us on television, if you were to pull back and look at the whole scene, which has happened many times in films and television shows about the business, you see a crew, you see light panels and all kinds of stuff that you don't see in the actual frame of truth. And it's all artifice, it's all made up, it's all bullshit, right? I don't know, are we allowed to swear on this or no?
Yeah, absolutely. If I get to a point where people are commenting like they're cursing too much, then I kind of feel like either I'm having on some really outlandish people for the sake of being outlandish, or I have the wrong audience. And you're within the wrong reason. You're good.
All right, fantastic. So I was introduced to the fact that artifice can create joy. Being in what sounds like a big, huge room that's very reverberant with a band playing music or a microphone that's like awesome, when in reality you're in a room that's a lot smaller than the room I'm in now. And you're running all these recorded pieces, and you have cartridges that you don't even hear them kicking on, and all of this stuff that's being built in the theater of the mind really became fascinating to me. So much so that I went to Ohio State. I declared a dual degree major in broadcast communication and computer and information science. I had worked at NASA in my high school years at the wind tunnel at the Lewis Research Center in Cleveland. And I was I was really into tech. Our school had the very first, the first computer I worked on was actually at a remote location via a teletype, which was connected via the telephone, which used to have like a receiver, and you would put it into these suction cups, and it would hear the sounds, and that's how you would connect. It's
like the movie War Games.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, War Games, you had the computer right there, right? When Matthew Broderick answers the question, "What are we doing?" I don't know, but it's cool. So we had one of the first mini computers, the PDP-8 and the PDP-11. I really was fascinated with that as well. And entertainment and technology have kind of weaved their way in my life all along the path, even so that today, I have an app called Rehearsal Pro. I have a website that I teach voiceover on, and I am able to manage the creation and management of those items because I have this background in technology. I used to work for AOL. Anyway, it seems like entertainers often have either an aversion to technology or a bent for it.
Yes.
And I work an awful lot with people who have both. And so, I loved the theater of the mind and the creation of this joy so much that I ended up quitting college the first month of my sophomore year because I was already doing what I wanted to do. I was doing mornings on the radio station in town that I was at.
So you were making money then in college as a sophomore? So you're doing well.
Like 11 times what I had projected I would make with a computer and information science degree when I got out 3 years later. Wow, and that's one of the reasons that I made that decision, because, at age 19, 20, you think you're going to live forever.
Sure.
and that the amount of money that you're making is a mint, So yeah, I remember in the middle of a snowstorm driving to the administration office at Ohio State and withdrawing because I was having so much fun doing the other stuff that I was doing.
I think that's amazing. But
Yeah.
you've said something that I find really interesting, and I feel like I run into I run into the exact opposite more often than not. And you said 11 times more than you projected, after getting out with a degree, which means you actually went through the thought process of projecting how much you're going to make when you graduate from university.
Sure.
So was that something instilled in you by your parents, or was that because of your fascination with tech and numbers and calculations?
Oh, I think it was an attachment to safety.
Mm,
I wanted to make sure that if I knew that in radio, it's kind of easy for you to get fired. I watched a bunch of people get fired over the year and a half that I worked at this station, and then I got fired.
what did you get fired for? Or what was the reasoning?
So completely reasonable reason for them to fire me. In 1978, in August, Pope John Paul I was installed as the Pope.
Okay.
And he was the Pope that only lasted 31 days before he died.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, there was a song out by Billy Joel called "Only the Good Die Young."
Yeah, I remember that song. It's a great song.
In those days, yeah, it's a great song. In those days, I was yelling everything because I was still learning how to be a DJ. And I think I said something like, "Hey, this song goes out to Pope John Paul I. He died too young for all of us, didn't he?" So the problem is, the song "Only the Good Die Young" is an anti-Catholic song. It has lines in it like, "Come out, Virginia, don't make me wait. Catholic girls start much too late." Monday morning, the diocese organized a protest out in front of the station. And I didn't realize when I got a phone call from my program director, "Hey, could you come in, bring your keys? We're changing the locks." And I walked past this protest. I'm like, what are they protesting about? What's and nobody knew what I looked like. Right. I had done this on a Saturday. I got fired on a Monday. He said, "Yeah, let me have your key. Yeah, you're gone. Here's what's going on." And, and it was like, whoa, okay. So I realized at the time when I was doing the analysis of my income, is that something that would last if I was on the beach for a while? And, blessedly, I have never been on the beach longer than about a day. In some cases, I actually have had another job before I made the decision to quit a job.
That's always nice.
And then at some point I thought, it's not a good idea to be strategically trying to plan what these people who control your destiny are going to do or prepare for it. So that's when the entrepreneurial thing really started for me. And I started doing things entirely on my own. So, yeah.
I mean, to some degree, I would argue that it started way earlier because of your desire for safety, because, being an entrepreneur, my family, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were both teachers. My dad left the teaching before I was born and went into the nonprofit world. He ran the National Kidney Foundation, and then he basically was just sick of having his hand out all the time and said, I need to be, encouraging people from the other side, to donate and to help people. And so he went into, private business and entrepreneurship. And from the time, I guess I was like 5 or 6, my life was stuffing envelopes, going to the office on the weekends. And, one of the things that, I learned is that entrepreneurial endeavors, the entrepreneur's life is a constant mix of calculations, gambling with your, what you think is the right move, and really having a mindfulness or an awareness of what's going on out in the world, what your skills are, and how you can, meet the challenges, meet the need. So like, just from what you're saying, at a young age, you're already planning what your salaries are going to be and calculating these things. Like, that to me is so far advanced from what most people are thinking at that age. So, that's what comes to mind for me, at least in listening to your story.
Mhm.
Now, once you started thinking about being an entrepreneur and taking it more seriously and saying, okay, I can't leave my life in other people's hands, you, I'm assuming, went and ended up probably working for someone else at some point in time, at another radio station or what have you. So how did that kind of mix happen? Like, starting to kind of develop your own thing. Like, you talked about the app, and you have your voiceover, you teach voiceovers. So how did all of that kind of begin versus working for people, freelance gigs, and then figuring out how to kind of do this on your own without needing anyone else?
So I did a lot of it in parallel.
Mhm.
Starting in the 80s, I was working for broadcast companies and broadcast stations, but I was also reading, business books and doing things on the side. Voiceover itself is an entrepreneurial situation. So that was
Yeah.
kind of like running my own business as a side hustle, in addition to working on radio. And sometimes it was flipped around. I used to do weekends at a radio station, and I made minimum wage. It was like, I don't know, $5-6 an hour or something like that. But just being on the air meant that I could go do gigs at nightclubs
Yeah.
and make like $500 an appearance. So it made a difference, having that exposure. So that introduced me to the differences in the currencies that we use in our lives. Are they the currencies of exposure? Are they the currencies of gaining knowledge? Are they the raw currencies of money being exchanged? Um, you know, I think that I was always drawn to the notion of not putting all my eggs in one basket. And then, at some point in time, I just thought, okay, I can do this by myself, and I can take side gigs with companies,
Mm-hmm.
working for companies. So I worked for America Online. I was the voice of their online their support phone lines for 28 years. So you
Okay.
used to get mad at me before you get mad at a live person when you'd call AOL.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And
I'm sure I called in at one point in time
yeah,
then.
and
Because
you
when I
heard
was
me
in,
say, thank you for
yeah.
calling America Online, the world's most popular online service.
Oh, that's
Um,
hilarious.
and about 38,000 other things, because they had me do individual prompts.
Mm.
And so that, it was like the easiest job in the world. It was great. And I always kind of felt like, I was drawn to those jobs that I didn't feel like they were jobs. I felt like they were just fun things to do that I was constantly surprised that I would get a check for, and I certainly feel that way about acting. Every
Yeah.
single time I get booked on an acting job, I am always surprised when either the direct deposit hits my bank or the check arrives. It's like, wait, oh, right, I get
Yeah.
paid for this. Right. Okay, good. This is awesome. So I think it was just sort of a parallel track all the way, and it continues to be that way today. So,
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, that really encapsulates, I feel like, the absolutely kind of the idealistic, or the best way you could possibly imagine doing it, is having fun. And by the way, here's a check so you can pay all your bills and have your life needs met.
yeah.
Acting is such a funny thing too, because I never realized, I never realized how difficult it was to have a career as an actor until I'd been out here for 5 years and couldn't get a single audition, and even after I got my first break on national TV, it was still a constant struggle. How am I going to get another audition? What do I have to do? Because I don't think my agent's doing anything. And so
So that's a very interesting statement that you made. Can I take a moment and deconstruct that?
please.
I think when people say, my agent didn't do anything for me, my agent isn't sending me out enough, hopefully you don't feel that way anymore.
I
But
don't. I don't.
unless an agent is engaged in serial fraud and isn't really running his agency or her agency to the best of their ability, the phrase is, I'm not being called in enough by casting, not my agent isn't sending me out enough. Because I interned at a lot of what I did before I actually started going out for auditions and getting booked was learning the business, using the
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln method.
Hmm.
He once said, if I had an hour to chop down a cherry tree, I'd take the first 45 minutes and sharpen my axe. And I think getting to know the business that you're in, getting to know the tools that are used, the gatekeepers involved, the processes, the systems, the politics, the pitfalls, getting to know all of that as much as you can before you put yourself out there can minimize the embarrassments of, oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't, And so whenever I hear an actor saying, "Hey, my agent isn't getting me out enough," I say, "Well, hold on a second. Let me just question that for a second."
No, I think that's wonderful. I'm glad you stopped me to break that down, because that's probably the number one thing. If I was to go back and do it all over again, I don't know that I would even want an agent or try to get an agent for the first several years, because in those first 5 years, I was great on stage. I was not ready for the film and TV world. And even after I got my first, network TV job, I still I realized after that first audition, and because I tanked the audition, but the director just loved me and gave me a break, and then said, by the way, and kind of gave me some advice about auditioning, and everything changed. And I was like, oh my God, I got to learn how to audition, because this is not theater. This whole thing is different than I realized. And
yeah, auditioning is definitely a set of skills unto itself. And
oh yeah,
some of the same skills are used when you're actually on set, but most of them revolve around the process of auditioning and helping your character get their job done.
yeah.
And then the acting is very technical. The acting in television is very technical.
Yep.
Especially when they're doing close-ups and they're doing, kind of odd things, and you have to banana out and hit your mark at the moment that the lead is doing something. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that people never see.
Oh yeah.
And if you're good at your job, we'll never notice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They
And
just don't realize
that's
that.
the key. And I think that's one of the things I didn't realize, how difficult acting for, day players and, walk-ons and, supporting cast, I think is far more difficult than anything the leads are doing, because the lead has 5 pages to basically sell you on whatever it is they're doing. You have 1 word, 1 line, a minute, 30 seconds, whatever it is, to sell yourself as, the police officer or the barista or the mortician. One of your roles with opposite Keith or Sutherland, you were a morgue or mortician or something.
I was a emergency room doctor who had this whole line of I think that's what I was. I think that's what it said. I don't think it was either coroner or
Coroner. Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah,
I was
it wasn't
looking for,
mortician. Morticians work in funeral
yes,
homes.
That's right.
But,
that's like yeah.
Yeah, and that day was one of the best days in my life as an actor.
Oh, I'm glad I accidentally stumbled upon that. Please tell me why that's so.
I was sitting in chairs, and I was going over my lines, and then I got up and I went and I walked off, because it's a walk and talk. And in a walk and talk, that's one of those moments when you think to yourself, how did they stop talking the moment they ended up at the gurney? And the way you do that is to sort of backtrack and time your speech so that happens. It's not just, oh, maybe they took it 27 times until he finally stopped his speech right at the moment when he lifted up the sheet and said, here's your guy. So I was walking that off, and there's lots of different ways of doing that. Michael Caine talks about walking backwards and really setting up your steps. And in this case, it was an around the corner walk and talk. So it was a handheld camera following us and the cameraman was walking backwards as we're walking toward this eventual goal of the journey. And I'm also checking things along the way, other tables, just to make sure that's not the guy. And I'm doing this, and Kiefer Sutherland walks over and he goes, "Do you want me to walk with you? You want to go through lines?"
That's awesome.
Yes. Seriously? And he was an executive producer on the show. And so we walked it off, and I'm like, okay, he's doing it once just because he's a nice guy. You know, we did it 3 times, and
Wow.
he didn't offer any coaching or, hey, what if we do this? He just was like trying to be of service.
Yeah.
And I've read all kinds of articles about all kinds of actors, and everybody has something to say about them. Some people say good things, some people say bad things. I don't know the totality of what Kiefer Sutherland is like, but for that one slice of time that I spent with him, that was just joyous.
Yeah. That sounds pretty cool.
It ended up where we only did, I think, 3 takes. And one of them was because of a technical glitch with the Steadicam. So I don't make that a game. I don't make that a game of how few we can do, but I know that the producers do.
Oh, absolutely.
And they appreciate when we can move on.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're moving on, and Kiefer says, "Hey, let's." I hear him talking to the director, and he's an executive producer. So basically, what he says, they do.
Oh yeah, and he's the big name. I mean,
yeah, he's absolutely, he's the anchor of the show. And so I ended up getting an extra scene, which was great. Fantastic. I got called in again. I got paid more. It was awesome. And that was just like one of those moments where you go, hey, this is just really fun. You could be doing what your stepfather kept yelling at you to do when you were a teenager. You could be a welder. You could be a plumber.
And you would have made a great living.
Truck driver. What?
You would have made a great living doing those things, but it wouldn't have.
I would have been bored to tears.
Yeah.
I would have been. I mean, look, my grandfather was a plumber. My stepfather was a truck driver. God bless them. They had honest livings. I would have torn my hair out. I mean, it would have been awful. And so I just really had a moment to reflect that day on just how awesome this choice was. Yeah,
it's pretty special. I met Kiefer once, where I actually had a little eye to eye moment. It was actually at a nightclub before I had done any acting work. So I just any TV or film work, and I just happened to be at this nightclub one night, and he happened to be there with his friends and drinking. And this was back when he was drinking a lot. This is probably 20 plus years ago. And he just seemed like he was a nice person. I have no idea. That was the only real interaction I've ever had with him. But he didn't shy away. He wasn't like, go away kid or anything like that. I was just like, and he just kind of smiled, and he just seemed to down to earth. I'm just trying to have fun. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm hanging out with, in my head, I was hanging out with Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah. So like you said, I have no idea what he's in the grand scheme of things, but in that one moment, he was an absolute, gem. He was a gentleman and just as nice as I could have hoped for him to be, because I grew up watching his films and watching his father's films and everything else.
Sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sure you have a million stories from all, the different projects you've been on. But I'm really kind of curious, not all actors take their job as a business. A lot of them think of it as an art. So little backstory on me. For about 6 years, I behind the scenes ran a management company. We managed writers, actors, directors, and some producers. I basically talked my father into, he was technically retired, and I talked him into moving out here and being my manager. And because I wasn't getting auditions, I wasn't getting in the room, and I knew he would actually try. And if it was possible to get me in, he would get me in. So he said, sure, I'm going to do this, but you know the business better than I do. You've got to become, my business partner. You can be behind the scenes so that you can maintain the, I'm an actor thing and no conflict of interest, but you need to be telling me who to call, what to say, and, strategize with me. So after this was probably around year 8 being out here, I'd done a few network TV jobs, and we did that for just over 6 years. So I got to see, the inside of the business, and, was producing short films and everything else. I would say of the, let's say 30 actors that we represented at any given moment, few to none had any real sense of business, and we really thought of ourselves more as business consultants, and really tried to work with them and to impress upon them the necessity to think of this as a business, to track what they were doing, how many auditions, what offices, how many times they're getting in for what type of roles. And it was shocking how few actually did that.
Yeah,
And
I'm not surprised. Before the pandemic, I made a point of being available for new actors in town. I don't know if you remember the Actors Network.
oh yeah,
Kevin E. West.
yeah,
Yeah, I
Kevin E.
was a
West,
member
yeah.
of that. Yeah. And I made it known that, I'll take you out to lunch if you want to pick my brain, if you want to just I didn't
Wow.
have somebody who did that for me. I had a couple people who made some very good recommendations. And where I went to acting school at Howard Fine, that was a recommendation from a working actor. But I didn't really have anybody who took me under their wing and said, hey, here's how it's done. And there's a million ways to get it done, but many of those ways aren't very productive and are based on pure fallacy.
Yeah.
And I would push back and say that, everybody has like an A-lister actor that they would trade places with, that are kind of their spirit animal. For me, I can't remember his name all of a sudden. It's who I'm, Paul Giamatti. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
I had to go through a story in my head where I got mistaken for him one day. And, Paul Giamatti,
Brilliant actor.
my one-line description is Paul Giamatti meets Uncle Fester. That's me.
Nice.
And
Love it.
And so anybody that you would trade places with immediately, you would say, I'll take their life, I'll take their career. Yeah, absolutely. You must know, without fear of retribution, without anybody contradicting you, this is an absolute truth. They are great business people. They are great entrepreneurs. And it's not about tracking data that may or may not help you in the future, because you can track your auditions until you're blue in the face. That next audition is like an up or down with the stock. Previous performance has no indication on future performance other than just good business practice, right? So I would hear actors say this all the time. Oh no, I'm not a business person. I'm an artist. I don't want to touch the filthy lucre. I don't want to make my decisions on roles based on money. I want to make those decisions based on the art. I don't want to sully my hands. I'll live in a garret eating gruel before I do that. And I'm like, okay, well, good luck to you. I'd like you to consider something a little different, a little bit less hard on you. How about having an entrepreneurial spirit? Because my friend Michael Kostroff talks about, what we are. We're vagabonds. We're just as much in the mode of seeking work as our ancestors were when they would travel the countryside with their theater groups, and they would land in a town and they'd say, would you like to see a play? Come to our play, or now we have our little kit bag and we go for an audition, or we jump online for an audition and we say, are you interested in what I can do for you as an actor? Yes, great. Let's take a look at it, see if I can help you. No? Okay, I'll come back next week. That is the purest of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
The traveling salesman.
Yes.
That we are, saleswomen, salesmen, sales non-binary people.
Salespeople. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you cannot succeed in this business without having some sense of it being a business. Even if you're not the one running your business, you know, if you get to the point where you have a team, you have a manager and an agent and a business manager and a publicist and a stylist, and you know, you have all these people working for you doing the business stuff, you still have to be the one going, yeah, let's do that. Or no, I don't think I want to do that.
Well, you also have to understand that these people work for you and you have to oversee them, because otherwise it's not, you know, what's the idle hands of the devil's playhouse? I mean, you leave someone to their own devices without oversight, and they're likely to steal a lot of money from you, which is case after case after case in this industry, where you have someone that is in a place where they have all of the people working for them, and it doesn't occur to them that these people work for you. And if you don't track what they're doing and monitor it, then, you know, they're not, well, first off, they're not going to feel respected. They're not going to feel heard, seen, you know, the same way we want to feel heard and seen as actors and performers. And then if they don't feel heard and seen, then eventually they're not going to like you. And then eventually they might need, you know, their mom might need a surgery. And it's like, they're not going to miss 10 grand, 20 grand. And the next thing you know, slippery slope, one thing leads to another. Now that's, I think, a kind way of looking at what some people have done to people in this industry. But it happens. And I think it only happens when you're running your business poorly. Because if you're running your business like, you know, any other entrepreneur, that shit don't fly, you know? Yeah, it's wonderful advice. And I'm really glad you pointed that out. You know, anyone that happens to, you know, come upon this conversation that is either an entrepreneur or an actor will start to see that they're the same thing. And I think that's so critical and helpful. How many people actually took you up on your offer, you know, through the Actors Network to talk to you?
Oh God, hundreds.
Oh, good.
I mean, for years, I was table 42 at Granville here in Burbank.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I loved it. I mean, it was a joy to hear everybody's stories, how they got here, what their motivations were, what they wanted to do, what their impressions and current rules were that they'd created for themselves around being in this business. And then watching them go, oh, that's how that works. You know,
I had a female friend of mine who, for whatever reason, you know, she kept on getting auditions for prostitutes. And there was something about her that the casting directors just thought, wow, she's going to make the perfect prostitute. And she was like, I'm not a prostitute. I wouldn't do those types of things. That's not who I am. And I said, I was like, you're an actor, right? Like, so it's not about you being the role. It's about you taking a part of yourself and putting that into the character to make it a living, breathing entity, you know, a human. Yeah. So
yeah, I think actors make that mistake a lot. They do it in kind of weird ways as well. I narrate audiobooks, and I see audiobook narrators often saying, I'm not going to take that title. They have me saying the N word. I don't want to be known as a person that says the N word. And I'm like, yeah, you're not the person that says the N word. The character in the book that you're narrating says the N word. I'm not a serial killer.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a coroner. Right. I'm not, you know, a doctor on the take. I'm not a school superintendent. I'm none of the things that, well, once I was a DJ. So, okay, that, okay. All right, I get that. But for the most part, we have to be at peace with the notion that what we do with our characters is not who we are as people. And, you know, the viewers make that same mistake. Oh, yeah. You know, I was at Dragon Con. You know, once you do a show like Heroes and Lost and some of the other shows that I've been on, you could spend every single weekend going to a fan convention and signing autographs and making money. I don't do that much anymore, but I could if I wanted to. And at this point, I was in Atlanta, and a guy comes up to my table and he goes, "Yeah, could you make that out to Jeannie?" And I'm like, how do you spell that, sir? Your name is Jeannie? No, Jeannie's my wife. Well, where is she? Oh, she's over there. She's behind that pillar. She can't look at you. You're too creepy.
Oh, Jesus.
And I'm like, I'm not creepy. I'm a nice guy. What do you? And I saw her behind the pillar, and she goes, "Oh." People confuse us with our characters all the time. And I'm sure for some people that's an advantage when you're a romantic lead. Maybe you get, dates more often. I don't know.
I don't know. I would imagine I've not been on a big enough project where I played the romantic lead to have that issue, but I have to imagine I've been in some weird situations from plays that I've done. So I imagine that magnified by TV and film. I
Yeah.
don't know that it would be that wonderful because you become a piece of meat. You
Yeah.
become a I don't think I don't think there's I think anytime anyone viewing decides that, oh, you are this person, I think it's a detriment to you and them ever having an eye-to-eye genuine conversation and seeing each other as human beings, because you become less dimensional by that regard.
Yeah, there's a great film, I think it's called Sweet Liberty, with Alan Alda, and he's a professor that writes a book,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about a historical novel or a historical nonfiction, and they decide to make a movie out of it. And I forget who plays the lead character. I want to say Kim Cattrall, but that's not her. Anyway, she becomes this, curtsying Revolutionary War era, belle,
Mm-hmm.
who's the lead in the book, and he takes a shine to her because she's embodying all that he wrote about how romantic she was in the book. And then so she kind of says, okay, let's see where this goes. And the first time he meets her in her trailer, she's smoking and she's on the phone with her agent. She's got a drink in her hand. It's totally different from and you can see the look on his face, like, oh my God, this is what the movies do, right? I wanted to go out with my heroine,
Mm-hmm.
not this actress that is a normal human being, right? It was crazy. Anyway, so I think when people confuse the roles they play, actors in particular,
Mm-hmm.
not the viewer or the listener, confuse what they do with their characters as opposed to what they do as a person,
Right.
it can really limit what you get in terms of work, but also limit your imagination in terms of what you can do with those characters. I think it might
Yeah.
be a bit of a mistake for most people to make that
Oh,
error in
100%.
judgment.
I think that, if you personally have, interesting little quirks and personality traits, that make make you loved by your family and friends and so forth, then if you're playing a character that needs to be liked, then, you have a job to fill it with as many of those quirks and traits as are applicable to that character, because that's how you're going to make that character likable with you playing it. Now, someone else playing it isn't going to do those things because that's not what makes them lovable. But if you're supposed to be a lovable character or a likable character, then you need to bring those traits about yourself that are going to be more likable, that that people like you for. And conversely, if you're going to play a diabolical SOB that needs to be feared, then you need to bring your less attractive qualities to the surface, I think. But I mean, it's interesting because this conversation is also very applicable to, anytime anyone takes a job or decides to partner with someone, romantically, friendship, or business. The idolized version, oh, this person's so successful, I can't wait to work with them, like they're going to really make this project. And then you come to find out they have some either personal defect or maybe you just don't jive with them, and all of a sudden the illusion shatters, and now you're in business with someone you have no idea what they're about anymore because you were predicating on they ran this super successful shop down the road, and so this other side business is going to be gangbusters now. And so
Yeah.
it's that same type of delusion or illusion that we fall for. And it's so important, as actors, as people, to ask ourselves, what am I seeing, and what am I in love with here, what am I enjoying here, because that's, I think, really what helps us be more successful in our endeavors. I'm curious if you relate to that at all, or how you
Um,
relate to that.
I think that we may be talking about two different things. I mean, when you're getting into a business relationship or a personal relationship, Lord knows, I'm sure showrunners are happy that they only have to interface with actors that are guest stars for just a few days, and then they can move on.
Hmm.
In some cases, I mean, I watched 3 people get fired from Heroes in the 3 years that I was there. I watched one young lady get fired the day she was hired because it kind of went to her head.
Hmm.
And we're getting ready to turn around in a scene, and I hear this shrieking from back in chairs at the Video Village.
Hmm.
And she's yelling at a PA, a production assistant. I said room temperature. And I'm like, is she talking about a bottle of water? And it turns out she was. And the I don't know who did the actual firing, but somebody took her aside and said, yeah, if you wouldn't mind going back to your trailer, we'll catch up with you in a bit. And you kind of feel like you're dodging a bullet there. But I saw it happen a couple of times. And then I've also seen people who you thought were really difficult be just joyous to work with.
Yeah.
And so I think it works in both directions, but I think it's also, we have a bunch of temporal relationships, we see and play with each other as actors for a few days at a time, or an hour at a time.
Hmm.
Or I worked on Bold and the Beautiful, it was like 15 minutes. It's like, so yeah, I mean, I think that a partnership in general requires a little bit more than just reading somebody's press releases to see if you want to work with them.
I agree with you. I mean, I would hope people, go deeper when they're thinking about partnering with people. But I have, a lot of people in Los Angeles, come out here for, acting or directing or writing. And it's sometimes years, decades, or never that they actually find, their footing in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And so they end up having side projects, and they end up partnering with people on side projects, from what I've seen. And they just figure, oh, well, we're aligned, we're both after the same thing. And, it implodes because they're not, they think they know each other because they go to the same bar, or hang out at the same Starbucks and spend all day writing. And then they try to write together, and it's like a disaster. So I think that's where I'm making the comparison, between, actors and then just in life, business partnerships or other types of relationships. So you mentioned your app, which I use, which I love, which is how I found you. Um, the Rehearsal Pro app, was that something that you designed because you needed it, or did you see a niche? So it's
No, absolutely.
mostly because you wanted it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I tend to look toward technology for solutions to problems in
Hmm.
my life. It's just sort of the bent that I have. I was sitting in my my agent's office on a Monday afternoon at about 3, if I recall correctly. And this is while I was actually on Heroes, and I was due to be on set the next day. We were talking about some other offer that I'd gotten, and the phone rang, and it was the casting office on the Paramount lot for the show Community. Do you remember Community on, on NBC? Okay.
I auditioned for it a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. So they had this part for a piano player as a at the college, at the community college, for tryouts for a play. And they wanted me to come the next day to audition. And my agent said, he's on set the next day. Can we do it Wednesday? And they said, no, we can't do it. We're going to make our decisions tomorrow. Hey, I'll tell you what, if you can get him down here today before close of business, we'll put him on tape. And, you know, does he play the piano? It's not that hard. It's George Benson's on Broadway, so it's only 2 chords. And I'm like, yeah, no, I can do that. So, but it was a page and a half of kind of snarky dialogue. And so usually this was before Rehearsal Pro. Usually my process was I would record it on my computer, and then I would play it back on loop with iTunes, you know, with what was iTunes is now called the music player.
Right.
But I was at my agent's office. I couldn't go all the way back home and still get down there to learn my lines. So I used the voice memo app on my iPhone, which was pretty new at the time. It was like maybe 2 years old, 3 years old. And it did not have a looping button on it, so it wouldn't automatically restart. So I'm driving from, I think it was Sherman Oaks down the 101, which for those of you that don't know is like one of the most dangerous stretches of road in mankind. And I'm weaving in and out of traffic, trying to get down to Melrose so that I could go to Paramount. And the button on my phone to play is a soft button. It's not like you can't feel with your hand while you're watching traffic. I had to look down, and I'm like, this was in the days when the phrase, there's an app for that, was really popular.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there has to be an app for this, right? So I'm trying to learn my lines. I think I've got it. I've got maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'm thinking when I get to the lot that I can sit in the parking lot and I can go over my lines. Anyway, as I'm driving onto the lot, my agent calls me and he goes, yeah, don't worry about it. They found somebody. They called off the audition. Now, anybody else would be like, oh man, are you kidding me? I did all that, you know, but me, I couldn't wait to get home and see if there was an app for learning my lines. Cause in my head, I'm like, it would be great if Voice Memo did this. It would be great if I could see my script. It would be great. All these things were in my head. And I go home and there's one app with the worst name in the history of apps. It was called Hollywood Helper Broadway Buddy. I swear to God, that was the name of the app.
I never even heard of it.
Right. Well, the way you got your script onto the app was you had to use a Windows device, a Windows computer, open up a share on your hard drive, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what?
That's a lot.
This is crazy. I can do better. And I did. And I remember when we redid it entirely about 8 years later from rehearsal to Rehearsal Pro, and we did a Kickstarter campaign, or Indiegogo campaign. I made a video about how this came to be and what we were doing and how it's going to be better and the celebrities that have used it over the years and how widespread it is in the industry. But it was definitely one of those rare cases where I am my own customer. Often when we you know, build businesses, we're not necessarily the target demographic of that business. And in fact, one of the mantras in the world of entrepreneurship is you are not your customer. Well, in this case, I absolutely was my customer. And I had friends who were beta testers who were my customers. And so all of the things that you see built into Rehearsal Pro these days are designed for professional film, television, and theater actors only. Even though the app has been used by Masons to memorize their rights as they move up the hierarchy.
They have a lot of memorization to do. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, speakers use it to memorize their presentations, their speeches. When they write me, they go, could you make it do this? And I'm like, no, I can't, because That's not what the app is built for. I have people all the time is like, can't we use your app as a teleprompter? I'm like, no, professional actors don't do teleprompter work. Teleprompter work means you're staring right down the barrel of the lens and you're making people very uncomfortable and you have no eye line on the horizon and you're not doing this right. And they're like, oh, maybe that's my problem. Anyway, so yeah, it was definitely something that was for me. And the dirty little secret is if nobody ever bought the app again, I would keep my iPhone, I currently have a 13 Pro Max. I would keep that with the installation of it on it forever and just use it. And it would make me a better actor because I believe being off book as an actor is such an advantage.
What's the starting place, really, I feel like? I don't know if you've done a lot of theater, but for me, theater, the joy of theater is that you have this rehearsal process. So you get off book as fast as possible so you can play during the rehearsal process. And, you obviously you want to refer back to the source material whenever needed and you have it off, sometimes you have it in your hand, sometimes you have it, right off stage.
Sure.
But the joy of theater for me was always the rehearsal right after you start to get it in your system, and you start to be able to really kind of feel where it lands and feel what these words are doing to your body. That's when shit gets interesting. And Rehearsal Pro for me makes it easier to do that. And
the same things that you're talking about for theater apply to auditions. You get to play this character for about 5 minutes online or in the casting office. You get to play that person for that amount of time. And
in many cases, that's the only time you get to play that character.
Sure.
So if you like it and you're having fun, you might as well make the most of it. At least that's kind of the way I look at it.
Right. And I think that people, actors who resist that, again, are falling into that artist category. It's like, I don't want to be locked into one performance. Well, you're not. What you're locked into is what you should be locked into, which is the source material that the writer wrote verbatim. And I think the flip side of that coin is that we worry way too much about forgetting our lines. We think that the moment we go up on a line or forget our lines, that's it. The casting director is done with us. If you can't remember anything, that's a problem. But if you screw it up, slightly, it's no big deal. I mean, you can talk to any casting director there is. Now, if you're in the room with the writer may have a problem with you.
Especially TV
that's
writers.
on them. That's not on you, right? But having the source material down pat means you have all the flexibility of taking that wherever you want it, not locked into one performance. If I said, okay, memorize this one line, now we're going to play it 9 different ways. I've had people ask me all the time, why don't you just have Siri read the other lines? And I'm like, again, that's not how professional actors work. The line, I love you, can be said 500,000 ways, depending upon the context of the script. It can be said very romantically. It can be said sarcastically. It can be said threateningly. It can be said like a villain. I love you. There's so many ways to do it. It all depends on what you're doing. And Siri has one way. I love you. That's it. You got nothing after that, right?
Liza Minnelli and De Niro, I don't remember the film, perhaps you do, but all she says is no, as he's trying to like ask her out at like a restaurant or a club or something like that. And he's asking her out and Liza's like, no. and that's all it is. It's like a Meisner exercise, but it's a brilliant scene because of all the shades that both of them have to bring to it in order to convey what's going on in the scene. And I've definitely used your app. And you, just to be clear for anyone listening, you don't sponsor me. You're not giving me any money for this, or no money's exchanging hands. I just genuinely do believe that your app is amazing and wonderful. And when I do my, the other side differently to hear myself back as the other character, it changes how I do, my line reading, which then makes me a little bit more facile, a little bit, I have an easier time that way. I don't know when we'll be going back in to actually meet with casting directors, but you used to get redirects And if you weren't able to redirect, then that may be your death nail, because depending on the project, they need someone that's able to take direction. More often than not, I feel like most of the jobs I've done, it's kind of, you go in, you do it, and you move on. But
Have you used line sets yet?
No.
So there's a little red L circle on the left-hand side of the toolbar across the bottom.
Okay.
And for the longest time, for years and years and years, you would record an entire scene and leave space in that recording for your lines, right? You would mouth your lines.
Yeah.
And that left you enough times, kind of almost like music -1. I don't know if you play an instrument and have ever played against a music -1 record, but that's, there's one element missing, and that's you. So
right.
Line sets let you record individual lines and then play them back as needed. So that's become useful in doing self-tapes, because you can record the other voice and then you just have your phone off camera, and all you do is tap the phone anywhere on the face of the phone and it plays the next line. So you can,
that's nice.
You can be your own reader, and in some cases that's all you got, right? Because there's nobody at 2:30 in the morning when you get the the notice that you should do this. And so that was something that people had asked for, that I said, yeah, that makes sense. And so we did that. And we're about to introduce a community where, if, say, your scene partner in a particular scene was an old batshit, Jewish guy, there
might be one.
Find me, and I would prep your script for you and do the other lines, do scenes, do line sets, highlight your lines, etc. And the community is going to allow you to either do it for free or to charge for it.
Yeah. And
so that's what we're looking to do, is to give actors some additional income for doing what they love.
That's awesome.
Well,
I didn't know about the line set, and that's awesome with this community part, because I feel like community is everything. We as in the Western world, not to get overly philosophical, but I think we are kind of encouraged to be individuals, and communities kind of second. And I grew up doing martial arts, so I have a very kind of Eastern background, which is all about community, individual second. And I feel like the more we can be a community, especially as actors, we don't look out for each other enough. And I don't think there's anything wrong with making money for your services. So, and I feel like that will fit in and make, for some people, they'll have an easier time asking for help if they can pay for it. And other people, just the ability to ask for help is going to be tremendous. So I'm always looking at, how do we support each other? And, everyone has their own way, and nothing against, I have a friend who's super involved with the union, and I commend him for it, but that's just not where I want to spend my time right now, maybe down the road. But,
I am super involved with the union as well.
You are?
Yeah. I serve on 5 different committees.
So Ben Whitehair then?
Ben is one of my best friends.
Yeah. So
I said to Ben when he got elected to the station that he's currently in now, I said, you got to remember me when you're famous, dude, because I remember picking you up off the floor at a party once. And he goes, we don't have to talk about that, do we?
Or maybe we do have to talk about that. We won't, but
yeah. No, Ben's great. He's awesome. Working.actor, I think, is his new website, and he and Gadali have created a great resource. The fact that he has risen so quickly in the ranks of the union to assume union leadership, especially for the faction of the union that he represents, to me is just like, it's lovely. It's just lovely to watch.
He's super dedicated, and he and I have had our battles, our brain battles over what's going on, moving forward, and how it's done. And I always have to commend him, because he believes it, and he's trying to do what he believes is right. and he understands, some of the other elements, and he takes them into consideration. He doesn't shy away from, any of the criticism or, what's going on across the aisle. And he really is working to do the right thing. I mean, I guess that's the easiest just way to put it. And I give him credit for that. And he is such a, he's like a dog with bone, like when he decides he wants to go after something, he's going full force, and he'll just, whatever he needs to learn on the way, he'll learn and just go. So
yeah. You were talking about community, and it's like many of the people that we've talked about, I met through one of the first communities that I joined when I got here, which was the Actors Network. That's where I met Ben. That's where I met Asia Ray Coleman. That's where I met Christine Aller, who actually created the whole power group concept and how power group moderators and facilitators did their job. It's what I model my monthly workouts and accountability meetings with VO Heroes. All of my clients, we do workouts once a month on mic, but we also have a business, going back to what we started with, a business meeting every month about how's your business going? What did you accomplish in the last month? What do you have coming up this month? What challenges do you have? What's a thought starter that might make some sense to you as we move through this? And I think that tying into community is really important, because whether you do make this on your own, and Western culture certainly celebrates the lone wolf, the individual, the go west young man.
It does. I think it's a fallacy, but it does definitely support the myth of going alone, lone wolf. I don't think anyone can actually do it alone. That's, I'll argue that all day, but
yeah,
I think you're right. The community, I mean, I tend to get a little philosophical, so I apologize, but I don't believe that humans are tribal by nature. I believe that we are survivalist by nature, and we learn from an early age because we are stuck, unable to take care of ourselves for so many years. We learn that if we have someone else, we're better off. And the more people we have, the easier it gets. And then
I so wish you were right. I so wish you were right that we're not tribalist.
I really do. I think tribalism is a survival mechanism for groups.
Yeah.
It's not nature. It's a offshoot of nature. Nature is the survival, and the group forms for whatever reason, and then they get cornered and they have to survive, and that's when they become tribal.
Gotcha. So all of these movies that are based on people being isolated from their tribe and having to make it on their own, go off on the hero's journey, and then come back and be welcomed back or rejected by their tribe, etc. I just look at the way politics are today, and I think we've divided ourselves into a couple of really, really dangerous groups of people that no longer have the individual as their goal, or the individual success as their goal. I mean, there's a thread that looks like that in our union, as you know. And so, I wonder sometimes, about us as actors. We have to have skills that allow us to do things in private, by ourselves, in a silo, silently in many cases. We all know when a scene changes, it's when we say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
A scene changes when we put it up on its feet,
mm-hmm.
When we start to add some movement to it, especially for stage, right? So I think it's a delicate balance between working within a community and working within a group of people, because when you have a cast, you have a forced tribe. You are now part cast and crew, whether you like it or not, you're in a group. Mm-hmm. And how you as the individual serves that group is an interesting thing to watch.
Absolutely. And I think the key word there, at least in my mind, is serve. Because as an individual, you hold no value to the group or the community if you are not there to service that community and group in a way that is beneficial to the larger whole. And
in my case, I have to kill them all. So I have a lot of fun.
In what way?
Well, usually the parts I play are creepy, right, evil villains.
Yes.
And, I didn't think that that was going to be as much fun as it ended up being. Just the very first time, I thought, when I moved out to LA, I'd done nothing but morning radio, syndicated radio,
So
anything
you're
that I
always the
had.
good guy then, really.
Funny
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
I was like the goofy frat boy that never grew up, the wacky uncle that you try to keep the kids away from, that kind of guy. That's what I thought would happen. I would be sitcom city when I came out to LA. And the very first booking I got was on Heroes. And instead of that, it was creepy, evil, yet huggable villain, misunderstood, villain against his own wishes, but man, what a, like, I found out that villains get the hottest chicks and the coolest weapons and the most awesome layers to do their work from and the best lines in the screenplay.
Yes.
So I'm like, sign me up. I'm there.
Villains
Absolutely.
are multidimensional because in my mind, they seemed to always be the most fleshed out characters, because the hero is going through a journey trying to find themselves. So they're oftentimes have less dimension and less fully fleshed out, because we're trying to discover that, and especially for a TV show, which can play out over years versus a movie. But yeah, I think I told my agent, I think after I did my first network TV job, I said, is there any way I could play the villain? And she was like, there's no way anyone's going to believe you're a bad guy. And I was like, I can be a son of a bitch. I could do it. And I have gotten to play some bad characters, but I feel like that's like, if you're an actor and you really want to dig in and really go through some stuff, like, I feel like a villain is the best place to find that. That's
certainly been fun for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really amazing. We've been talking for a while, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but on the entrepreneur and kind of the decisions you're making to get where you're at, I know you've got so much going on, and you're always juggling things. Do you ever, like, how do you take stock in everything, and how do you kind of manage your decision-making process in terms of what new you want to tackle? I mean, obviously every new acting position is a new business to some extent. But then you have, your voiceover classes and your app. Like, how do you manage that and time and I don't know. Does that make sense?
So I think, a couple things. First of all, I built my business around the notion of work comes first. So yes, we have all of my voiceover courses are recorded. So you can wake up in a cold sweat at 2:30 in the morning, and the only thing that's going to fix your life is to become a voice talent. You can start working on it at 2:34.
That's
so
awesome.
You can get it anytime you want. We do live sessions once a month. I have a team of 7 coaches, soon to be 8 coaches that you can also book with, and so on. But there's a slide that I show in every one of those sessions that says you may show up here one day and see this slide instead of hearing me. And the slide says, add an audition. And for me and for my students, work comes first. And it's a tenet of what I do. So in my case, I do suffer from shiny butterfly syndrome every so often, oh, that would be fun to do. Look at that. That's great. And I fight against that every so often because I have a lot on my plate, which I love all of it. I love all of it. But if I get booked on an audiobook, which is 4 or 5 days at a studio somewhere or in my own studio, things get rearranged, things get moved. And everybody's aware of that. I think that's the goal, is that when you create your business, create it on your terms, create it on your with your rules, and it gives, our business gives you that flexibility within reason. Once you get booked on something, you're now subject to other people's rules as well. but that's the goal, right? You are like, okay, great. I have an audition. I'm going to move this. I have 2 voiceover auditions. I'm going to move that. Or I got plenty of time. Is my day's going exactly the way I thought it was going to go? That's fine. I don't have much more, and this may change at any moment, so I reserve the right. But I don't have much more that I would like to do before I leave. I have had the proverbial wonderful life. I have accomplished far more than I ever thought I would be able to accomplish. I've had moments in my life that some people only dream of. I have been able to create things to leave behind that I think will be helpful to others. I've been of service. I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon. I'm not like saying, oh yeah, I've just been diagnosed with a deathly disease. No, that's not it. But you said something really interesting earlier. You're not that much older than me. I'm 63 years old.
Oh.
And so,
well, that's a little bit of a surprise.
I've got a little bit of time left, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I don't know. But at some point in time, I'm going to look very different than I look right now. I'm going to sound very different than I sound right now. And things are going to change for me. And who knows what the future brings. But I can tell you that keeping myself on the straight and narrow, I use a tool called the Ivy Lee method, which is very low tech, very high touch. I have a stack of index cards, one for each one of my projects, and a topper card that is like, this is what you're doing next. And every day at the end of the day, I make sure that that topper card is up to date. And then it's waiting for me in the morning when I wake up. And that little tiny bit of focus is, first of all, it's a system that was created for Standard Oil back in the late 1890s, early 1900s. And Charles Schwab, who is known more for being the name of a financial organization than being the managing director of Standard Oil for John D. Rockefeller, hired a guy who was a publicist named Ivy Lee. And Ivy Lee had all of these clients, including Standard Oil, and he had to keep all of their things straight. And how did he do that? How did he get productive? And he hired him to create that system for their executives at Standard Oil. And this was the system. And I've used it for a while, and it really makes that one little notch of focus and critical thinking about what I'm going to do next, how I'm going to do it. And it's subject to change. I can take that card and throw it out the window if an audition comes up or a fire happens, my server goes down, or who knows. But the point is being prepared and having a rule set that helps you live that life of coordinated focus on what it is you want to do and how you want to do it, with the flexibility of changing at a moment's notice based on our business. I've managed to accomplish that. And so I like that. And I like how things are going. And I hope they go a lot longer, but I'm certainly prepared to say this was great.
That's amazing. And I think it's very inspiring. It's there's something beautiful in the ability to have a plan and then be able to totally on a moment's notice be able to change directions and adjust. And
well, that's that feeling of your mortality, realizing your mortality and knowing your mortality. It's going to happen to everybody at some point. It doesn't happen when you're 20. It doesn't happen when you're 30. For me, it happened when I was 44. I'm like, oh, wow, this isn't going to be forever. And that's what made me move to Los Angeles and become an on-camera actor. I'd always wanted to do it. And it was at that moment that I thought, well, if I don't do it now, if I don't get this second act in gear, it likely won't happen. And it wasn't going to happen from Washington, D.C., which is where I was.
No. What station were you at DC?
Q107 and WMAL.
Okay.
I don't know if
I grew up in the DC metro area, so I remember 107. I grew up listening to DC 101 a lot. Greaseman. Yep.
Yeah. He was my announcer on my syndicated radio show.
Oh, that's cool.
I love giving work to people that I know, that I've competed against. Don and Mike were total a-holes to me, except not on the air, right? Don was nice. Mike was beautifully nice. He was just went not on the air. On
Right.
the air, they were cutthroat because that's their job, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that the on-camera acting thing wasn't going to happen in LA. And so I just made the decision, I'm moving to LA and I'm going to see if this gorgeous face and this amazingly svelte physique could do something on camera. And
That's
it's
awesome.
worked out.
Yeah, it's worked out well. I mean, I have nothing but respect for what you've been able to do in your time here. And I really, really, truly appreciate you being here. I'm sure we'll continue to talk after this.
No, we're never going to talk again. I'm just saying.
I may change your mind on that. Then.
Okay, good.
How about that?
All right.
Yeah, I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say in this session because you've really, thank you. I just thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Don't forget to leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. New episodes every Tuesday. And for short clips from each episode, check out YouTube. Thank you. And don't forget, your life story is yours to write and rewrite as many times as you want.